Hello mathematicians and welcome back to solving quadratic equations. Today we're going to be talking about the quadratic formula. So go ahead and make sure you have this worksheet right in front of you. So far you have been solving quadratic equations or finding the roots by factoring, okay? And today I'm going to teach you a second method that we can use. You do not have to use both, you either use one or the other. You might be thinking, well, why do we need a second one if factoring is so much fun? Well, I'm going to answer your question with my own question. Suppose we're given this quadratic equation here, and I'm telling you, where are the roots of these guys? Or what x's can I plug in so that this whole thing will become 0? Well, you might think, okay, this is a trinomial, so I'm going to use an x method. Last term goes at the top, middle term goes at the bottom. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to 4 and add up to 3. I know the numbers that make 4 is 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. But wait a second, neither of these pairs add up to 3. 1 and 4 make 5. 2 and 2 make 4. So this is when we run into an issue because factoring does not always work, okay? Factoring doesn't always work. Sad face, okay? So this is why we need a second method just in those cases or whenever you want that you can't use factoring, okay? And the great thing about the quadratic formula is that although it can be a little lengthy, it never lets you down. It always works. So this method always works. You're never going to run into the issue where we just did, where there's no solution and we get kind of stuck, okay? Always works. So as we see here, this is our quadratic formula. And I see that there is these letters A, B, and C. Now, I highly recommend you have some colors here. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight my B's. I have a B right here and a B right here. I have an A and an A, and then a C. So, where the heck do we get these A, B's, and C's? So this formula is kind of like a recipe if anyone has ever made a cake or a muffin. And this A, B, and C are our ingredients. We need the ingredients in order to complete the recipe and make our cake. Well, let's go back to what we learned at the very beginning. This is the quadratic equation. So any problem is usually in this kind of setup. I also like to refer to it as the map. And as we can see here, we also have A, B, and C. So here I have my B, right here I have my A, and then my C. This map is going to help us figure out what our A, B, and C is going to be for our formula. And it's always going to be different, okay? So let's go ahead and jump to the first example. Now, before we're even able to go straight into the fun, we have to make sure of one thing. And that is going to be the first step. That's make sure your equation, I'm going to write equa for short, is equal to 0. This is really important. If it's not equal to 0, your A, B, and C is going to be off. So right here, I see that it is indeed equal to 0. So I can go ahead and start. The second thing is, well, before I'm able to use my formula, I have to identify my A, B, and C. A, B, and C. So here I'm going to write A, B, and C. And the way I'm going to identify this is by looking at the problem that I am given. So let me color code this. So in case you forget, your A right here is always going to be in front of x squared. So looking at a problem right here, x squared, well, there isn't really a number in front of it, right? But there is, it's an imaginary one. And that is going to be our A. So my A is equal to 1. B is right in front of x right here. That's my map. It's telling me look right in front of x. So looking at my problem, the number right in front of x is this 8. So that has to be my b. So my b is equal to 8. Lastly, c is the one hanging out all by himself at the very end. He does not have a variable. So I'm going to look at my problem, and I see right here that 15 is all by itself. It does not have a variable next to it. It doesn't have an x. So this one has to be my c. So I'm going to put 15. And honestly, right here is where most people make the mistakes, okay? And I'm going to write in a little Taurus tip, and that is that these should be only numbers. So if you ever get a problem and you write x squared right here, this is wrong. There should only be numbers here. I shouldn't see any variables, okay? Now that we identified A, B, and C, now we get to use a formula. So we get to plug in to formula. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look right at this formula right here. And anytime I see, and I'm going to copy it down exactly as it is, but anytime I see an A, B, or C, I'm going to write in our values instead. Okay? So I have x equals negative, I have a B. So instead of B, I'm going to write 8. Oops. Let me do a pink. Okay, I have this plus or minus sign, which many of you have probably never seen before, but we'll get to it right now. Radical. And then I have b squared. So instead of b, I'm going to write 8. But I'm not going to forget that squared. Minus 4 times a. Instead of a, I'm going to write our a, which is 1. Times c. Instead of c, I'm going to write our c, which is 15. And this is all over 2 times a, which is 1. So honestly, this is the hardest part, is plugging in the values. And notice that I use parentheses to organize my handwriting. So not handwriting, but we use parentheses. No, it's not going to fit. Give me a second. We use parentheses to organize our work. If I didn't use parentheses right here, it would have looked like 4,115. And that is not correct. I am multiplying 4 times 1 times 15. That is why I use parentheses. So let's carry on to the next step. I have a bunch of parentheses now. This looks very messy. So my next step is I'm going to clean up my parentheses. Clean up parentheses. So it's just going to be a lot of multiplication, okay? Multiplication. All right, so I have x equals, and right here, let me get another color. I have a negative times a positive 8. So that's going to give me negative 8 plus or minus square root. And right here, I have 8 squared. Remember that 8 squared is equal to 8 times 8. It is not equal to 8 times 2. I see this happening a lot. That is wrong, okay? So 8 times 8, hopefully you have a calculator by you. That is 64. Minus, so right here, we have to be a little bit careful. I have 4 times 1. That gives me 4. And then 4 times 15 is going to give me 60. I just happen to know that off the top of my head. It's a random fact that's ingrained in there. It's okay if you don't know that. All over 2 times 1, which is just a simple 2. I'm going to keep going, but now I'm going to focus on my radical. So this sign right here, that little house is called a radical. I'm going to focus inside of that guy because I see right here subtraction, which I can easily do because I'm a smart mathematician. So clean up radical. And remember, the radical is a little house. So I'm going to rewrite because part of being a great mathematician is being organized. -8 plus or minus radical, and 64 minus 60 is 4. And this is all over 2. My next step is I'm going to take the radical. And by taking, I mean I'm going to plug it into the calculator. It's right here, huge. Use calculator. So I have the square root of 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the 4, which is the little thing that's inside. And then I'm going to hit the square root button, and I get that it is equal to 2. So again, I'm going to rewrite x equals -8 plus or minus 2. Notice I did not do this. That is wrong. The answer is only 2. We get rid of the radical by using the button in the calculator. Now after this, it is easy breezy. So we have this symbol right here that's called the plus or minus sign. And what that means is that sometimes 2 is going to be positive and sometimes it's going to be negative. So we have to take into account when it's going to be positive and when it's going to be negative. And we do this by doing 2 cases. 2 cases. So right here, I'm going to do one case where 2 is positive. So I'm going to put x equals -8 plus 2 over 2. My second case is when 2 is going to be negative. So after this, I'm just going to simplify my fraction. So I have -8 plus 2. That's going to give me -6 divided by 2. And then 6 divided by 2 is 3. And a negative times a positive is a negative. So that is my first answer. Likewise, on the other side, -8 minus 2 is a -10 divided by 2. And then 10 divided by 2 is 5. And a negative times a positive is a negative. And that is my final answer. So these would be my 2 answers. The way you would write this would be x equals -3, comma, -5. And we are done. So I'm going to go ahead and do the back side now. And then I'm going to go a little faster. I know that this felt a little long. It's okay to feel overwhelmed right now. It looks overwhelming because you're learning it and because I'm being very specific about my steps. But eventually you'll be able to do this 2 steps at a time and a lot more faster. So if you turn over to the back side, we have this new problem. And I'm going to rewrite my steps over here. Well, I know that my very first step is that I have to make sure my equation is equal to 0. Make sure my equation is equal to 0. This one's different because it is not equal to 0. We have a -5 right here. To make it equal to 0, I have to move it over. So I want to bring him over here somehow. And I do this by looking at what 5 is doing. 5 is negative. So to move it over, I have to do the opposite and make it a +5. What I do to one side, I do to the other side. So then I get on this side, -5 plus 5 is 0. Good job, we completed our work. But now I have this +5, and I have to be careful about which 5 do I add this to. So do I add it to x squared? Nope, that is not like terms. Do I add it to 6x? Nope, that is not like terms either. I add it to 4 because 5 has no variable and 4 has no variable. So my answer would be x squared minus 6x plus 9. Okay, second step. So this is my new equation now. I'm going to forget about the top guy, okay? Second step, identify A, B, and C. So I have A is equal to 1, right? Because there's an imaginary 1 right here. B is equal to negative 6. Remember that we have to carry the sign. And my new C is equal to 9. You see where it's important that's equal to 0? If we hadn't moved it over, we would have thought it was 4 and it would have completely messed us up. All right, next step. Plug into formula. So I happen to know this formula off the top of my head since I was in 8th grade because of a song that they drilled into us. And the song goes, x equals negative b. So instead of b, oh, let me color code this for you guys. I'm so sorry. I know you guys like colors. And then I'll do green. So negative b, so I'm going to put negative 6. Notice that I wrote 2 negatives because the equation has a negative in front of it already. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. So, negative 6, remember to carry that negative, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 9, all over 2 times a. Okay, so now my next step is I'm going to clean up the parentheses. So I have x equals, and be careful right here. Right here I have 2 negatives. A negative times a negative is a positive. So this 6 becomes a positive 6. But in math, we usually don't write the positive sign. Plus or minus the square root of negative 6 squared. Negative 6 squared is negative 6 times negative 6. So that gives me 36, and it is positive, right? Minus 4 times 1 times 9. So that is minus 36. All over 2 times 1, which is 2. Okay, my next step is I'm going to simplify or clean up the radical. And by that I mean what's inside it. So rewrite x equals 6 plus or minus, and I get 36 minus 36, which is 0, all over 2. Next step, take radical. So right here is when you use the calculator. So x equals 6 plus or minus. I'm going to hit what's inside of my radical, and then I'm going to hit the radical button, and I get that it's equal to 0. All over 2. All right, last step. I have 2 cases. Remember, because 0 is going to change up. So my first case is when 0 is positive. So x equals 6 plus 0 all over 2. And then I have when 0 is negative. But you're going to see this is not going to change up our answer at all. 6 plus 0 is 6 divided by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Likewise, 6 minus 0 is 6 divided by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Whoa, you see how we have the same answer? That means that we're only going to write it once. Remember, we don't want repeated answers. So x is equal to 3. And we are done. The biggest takeaway that I want you guys to take from this is that when our b is negative, we have to be careful about when we write it, okay? Notice that I have two negatives here. So go ahead and try Delta Math. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you in the next video.